Good afternoon, everyone. This is Colette Bartow from the Montana Office of Public Instruction, and this is the Montana Teacher-Librarian Digital Blast. I'm going to visit with you a little bit today around the topic of where we're going, and that is as professionals, as a profession, and how we can connect with others who can help us get to where we want to go. So with that, I just have a couple of things to show you before we get ready to get into the topic. And the first of which is just to let you know that this is just a very brief presentation that allows you to ask questions, to propose some answers, and learn about ideas, best practices, and share ideas with other teacher librarians. This is a partnership with the Office of Public Instruction, the Teacher Learning Hub, which is a new thing that I'll tell you a little bit about, and you as a participant. Also, just to get you kind of familiarized with the Google Hangout environment, you can click for links if you hover over the left side of your screen and touch the little yellow tabs, or you can ask questions by hitting the Q&A button as you hover over the left side of your screen. This works even if you're watching this as a recording. So if you'd like to look at resources that are shared or ask questions as you listen to this later on, that's all you have to do to get to that. I'm going to just show you what this kind of looks like live on my Google Hangout. If I hover over the left side, you'll see the showcase, and as you look to the right side of your screen, you'll see a list of links, items that I'm going to share today, and links to resources that you might be interested in exploring later on. So that's just what that looks like. All right, the next thing that I wanted to share is that there will be a recording of this presentation linked on the Teacher Librarian Google site. You'll see a PDF with the slides from the presentation and any printables that might go along with this. And also, as we did last year with the whole series of digital blasts, you'll be able to earn renewal units through the Montana Teacher Learning Hub, what used to be the MDPLN, and as I said, be able to get a renewal unit for watching the whole series of presentations over the course of this year. So this year, we've kind of started off differently. There were 4 presentations in September that we did in partnership with the Montana Historical Society. You can find links on the Teacher Librarian Google site. But this year, I've kind of left the topics open-ended and would really like to invite participation from other teacher librarians or other educators who have something that they'd like to share with our education community as a whole. So you can go to the Teacher Librarian site. It's linked here. It's also linked in the showcase or in the list of links that you see if you hover over the left side of your page. You can enter into a form the suggested topics and contact information for who might want to present. So I would really welcome that participation. Also, let's just kind of dive in because this is a quick presentation, a short time to kind of start thinking about an idea. And always, as we are really at the end of the first quarter of instruction, whether we're in elementary, middle, or high school, I always want to think back, where have we come from, the then part? What does that mean for what we want to do now, and how are the decisions that we make now going to impact the next steps that we take and the outcomes that we want to get to? So I always invite you to think about what you're doing in these terms, reflecting on the past, where you are now, and where you want to go next. Then that really has occurred to me when I thought about this question of where are we going, is kind of the idea that at this time of the year, in particular, we can feel really overwhelmed. There are many people demanding our time, whether it's device support, resource support, needing ideas, or just something. And as a teacher librarian, we sometimes feel isolated and alone in being able to solve the problems or to fill the needs that our schools have for us. And this really can look different depending on the grade levels that we serve, and also our colleagues, how many other teacher librarians we might have in our school, or if you're in a very small school and are serving as a teacher librarian in your capacity as a classroom teacher, what does that look like in order to have the support that we need to fill all of these needs that we have on a daily basis? So I think all of us can identify with this idea of then. It may even be our now to a certain extent. And in thinking about that too, I wanted to share something that I was part of in the end of September, the School Library Journal Summit. I took part in a panel that was entitled Becoming Essential, and it really is a way to it was a discussion that was moderated by Dr. Mike Eisenberg, and the other panelists were Mark Ray from Washington, Vancouver Public Schools, Tara Jones, who came to us from the Bellevue schools, and then a parent, Jeannie Quick, who, and we all talked about kind of where our profession has been. Jeannie from a parent and actually, an educator perspective, how our need to really support 21st century students looks different from the kind of the practice that many of us were trained up to engage in. Tara talked very much about being a reframed teacher librarian in her district. She is a research specialist and does a lot of teaching with teachers. So kind of the idea, and you can take a look at the article that summarized the panel, but really what it was all about as we move through our discussion is being able to focus on priorities, and not just external priorities, what we think we should be doing as teacher librarians, but the priorities of our schools, and reframing our practice to meet the needs of our local school. So for instance, Tara, who is in a high school setting now, kind of started to make the shift when she was still an elementary teacher librarian, thinking about the priority in both of her school settings was about instruction, providing support to teachers and making sure that information literacy instruction happened in classrooms. And with that being the priority, she had to find different ways to make sure that the management of the library facility are, make sure that the shelving got done, or make sure that the tidying up and that sort of thing got done. And so she turned to students to help solve that problem, and had basically a team of library assistants who helped to fill that gap so that she could focus on the priorities that she had. All of this happened, and I spoke to this, and as well as Mark, were the partnerships that we forged with our school leaders, our teacher leaders within our buildings, but also our district administrators, to find ways to maximize our time to make sure that the priorities of our schools were being met. It really is about partnerships so that we can solve problems collectively. So again, this is kind of thinking about where we are now, what are our priorities, and what do we perhaps need to think about in terms of who needs to help us to solve the issues that are confronting our schools in our situations, whatever the configuration. So you can click on the link and take a look at that article, and I'd love to hear back from you what you think about some of those ideas that are summarized in the School Library Journal Summit panel. So, a really big part of the message that panel spoke from is this prioritization. And you've heard me probably talk about this in different ways with the Library Information Technology Framework, but really it is about looking at our teaching role, about being advocates for reading and also fulfilling the responsibilities of managing the physical and digital collections and spaces that our library programs have. And so, again, I invite you to think about what is the priority within your practice at your school, and how can you focus on meeting that greatest need, either as a teacher, an advocate for reading, or the manager of a growing and changing digital library environment. So again, think about where those priorities are. And one of the resources that I have on the Teacher-Librarian Google site, and there is a link in the showcase in the links there, is an evaluation document. So based on those three roles of teacher, reading advocate, and manager, these are some criteria or some ways to tease out the things that you do as a leader of an instruction. And I think for me, in order to kind of think about the things that I can do to best support what Montana teacher librarians are doing, is to hear from you about what these things look like for an elementary teacher librarian. What does it look like for a middle school librarian and a high school librarian? Because our situations, depending on the grades that we serve, can be very different. So I'd invite you to take a look at this evaluation form as a way to reflect on where we are now. There are sections for each of the three roles. This one is for reading advocacy, and then the next is for information management and services. So I invite you to use this as a reflection tool for yourself. Also to have, you can use it as a kind of a springboard to conversation if you have an advisory team, or if you're sitting down with a school improvement team at your school, or within a group of schools if you're a smaller school, and talk about what your priorities are and how you want to kind of problem solve how you're going to get to that. So this is just one of the tools that I have to think about where we are now. The next thing is really, what do you need in order to get to that next? I can't emphasize enough the need to prioritize, because we can't do it all on our own as one teacher librarian or even two teacher librarians. If we can focus on the priorities that we have and look to those who can best help us, those partners who can best help us, make sure that we can deliver on the promise of what we need to do in terms of priorities, then we can collectively solve the problems. And that comes down to an enriched opportunity for every kid to engage in information literacy, a love of reading, and a way of looking at the library not just as a destination for a study hall, but as that gateway to other information environments and to kind of the wider world of information out there. So what do you need in order to identify those priorities? What do you need to know to be able to identify partners who can help you solve those problems? I'd love to hear from you. Give me a call, send me an email, and just, I'd offer the opportunity to sit down and visit with you. I'll do what I can to help provide and put some resources in your toolkit that can help you get to that calmness of knowing that you're doing what you need to do, without the pressure of feeling like you really can't do it all. So let me know, what do you need? I always want to remind you, especially when we think about partnerships, that we have our partners within our school library, our teacher librarian organizations, the Montana Library Association, the Montana Council for Computers and Technology and Education. If you've joined the Montana Ed Chat, that is a really wonderful community of educators who have brilliant and wonderful ideas, and that you can subscribe to the monthly newsletter that I've been putting out this last since last spring, basically. But also I want to invite you to think about, in those lateral connections, perhaps partnering with your local public library. We see a lot of great benefit, whether we're talking about the Montana Shared Catalog or different sharing groups, or our Montana federations. And I'll probably do a session coming up about what exactly the library federations are and some of those partnership opportunities are in more greater detail. But I want you to think outside of even the library world, for those partners who can help us get the job done. As always, I just want to offer the opportunity that if anyone who is listening wants to ask a question, you can go to the Q&A by hovering over the left-hand side and pose a question. That actually works when you're viewing the recording as well. So even if you're watching this later on, put those questions in. It comes right into my email inbox, and we can start a conversation that way as well. So here's the big question. Also, what topics do you need to know about that I can help provide some information or, show you a resource? I'd love to hear back from you. You can use the form that's on the Google site with the digital blast to pose those questions or propose the topics. If it's something that you feel strongly about and would like to just start a discussion or to be a presenter, it would be really fun. As Martha Cole and I discovered when we did the series in September, it's much more fun to have these presentations and do these together. So I would just invite you to pose those questions, to propose those topics, and I can plan accordingly from there. So, this is a brief presentation. I shared a few ideas about thinking and reflecting on where we are now and where we want to go next, provided some connecting points for communication. You have my email address on the screen, and the recording from this session will be posted shortly onto the Teacher-Librarian Google site. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the afternoon.